Hey, I'm Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. Today is actually the very first day of summer. Of course, it has been over 90 degrees, close to 100 degrees most days here for a bit. So it really feels like we are in the middle of summer right now, but I know for many of you, the growing season is just getting into full swing and temperatures are just now warming up, and this is really the most gardening that most people in the northern hemisphere are going to do is starting right about now. If you are just now finding me for the first time, because it is peak gardening season and everybody's really interested in gardening right now, I built this garden from lawn, just like that back there. And every week I do a garden tour on Wednesdays where I show you guys what is going on with the garden, what looks nice, but also what's gone wrong and the things that I'm doing to fix it, because I think it's important to model a realistic garden so that you don't get discouraged when your garden doesn't look as pretty as all of those perfect gardens that you might be seeing. Down here on the end is my tomato trellis. I have mostly paste tomatoes, but I do also have some Cherokee purples in here, and they are just now getting tall enough to get up to the trellis. And I've been a little bit of a lazy gardener, and I'm just kind of threading them through the trellis in most cases rather than tying them to the trellis. Right here is one that got snapped off by something, and you can see it's coming back, but I put next to it a cutting that I had rooted from another one of these plants. So this one will catch up as the season progresses, but over here you can see the jungle is already beginning to form. Last year I had quite a jungle in here with these tomatoes, and you can see I've already gotten a little lazy about pruning suckers. This, starting here at the base, is now officially 2 full tomato plants. I could cut this here, and I might still, we'll see, because this trellis is starting to look pretty crowded right now. I am starting to see though some of my first flowers forming, and oh, that looks like a little baby fruit right there. So from baby fruits like this till harvest is at least a month, maybe more. You might think that at this point you're getting very close, and in the past I have gotten very excited when I see those and then been very disappointed when it's a lot of waiting, especially once the fruit gets big and starts to ripen. You think that you are so close, but the ripening takes so much longer than you would expect. I did have a little trouble getting these tomatoes started, so they are pretty late for my area. My entire first batch of seedlings just randomly died on me. But these ones have been pretty vigorous, and really with tomatoes, once you get them going, it's really kind of hard to get them to stop. They start going wild, and then pruning regularly becomes an issue. Otherwise, you end up with like an absolute mess of tomato plants. So right here at the front of the tomato row, I have my mint bush now. It is getting quite out of hand. You can see I've recently taken from it too. I tried a recipe from a viewer for mint chocolate chip cookies, and that was actually really tasty. Once I've made it a few more times, maybe I will also share a video talking about making that. But behind this plant is one I haven't touched on so much. This, I will put the name on the screen because I'm sure I will say it wrong, but it is a cilantro replacement. So if you didn't know, cilantro is a cool weather crop, and that is really frustrating because it goes in salsas, which are made of hot weather crops, like your peppers and your tomatoes and your onions even. And so you've got all this stuff ready for salsa, and then suddenly your cilantro is bolting and it is bitter and it's not fun to eat. So I'm experimenting with cilantro alternatives, and this plant is supposed to be really cilantro-y similar, but it likes the hot weather. Once it gets big enough to pull from and actually use in a salsa, I'll keep you guys updated on how that turns out. It was actually pretty finicky to get started, so we'll see if it ends up being worth it. Right here at the beginning of the next row, this is where my peppers are, and until recently I also had a ton of garlic and onions here, and finally all of that is out. Peppers have their room to grow. And right here at the front, I have some little basil plants. as well as my experimental cabbage that has been here since the fall garden. And I've just been watching it to see what happens week to week, because the entire head got eaten off by a groundhog. And it's just been kind of interesting to watch and see what this plant does as it's recovering. A lot of these peppers are looking really, really healthy. I'm starting to see baby peppers, almost fell, baby peppers everywhere. But if we walk on down the line, we'll run into some that don't look quite as healthy. Over here, you can see these peppers here seem to have dropped all of their lower leaves, and the leaves that they've dropped are not looking great. So this is an issue that we have to solve. I saw this actually last year in my pepper plants, and I wasn't sure what it was either, but it kind of started out as these little spots and then spread. And last year, after like about a couple of weeks of this, it did clear itself up. And I'm not sure if I did something to clear it up or if it just cleared itself up on its own. But the fact that I'm seeing it again on peppers in a similar area makes me think that it might be something from the soil. So the thing that I'm trying right now is actually adding good microbes to the soil via bokashi grains, and just kind of hoping that that can kind of help outcompete any pathogen that might be affecting them, because at this point I can't exactly heal the ones that have been already affected by the pathogen. I can just maybe suppress it. Things that you can do to kind of prevent any pathogens from the soil from getting on your plants is having a good mulch coverage, which I do. I have wood chips and straw in the beds. Last year I also had mulch coverage, so perhaps it is not bouncing up from the soil, and maybe it's something in the soil that is being drawn up into the plant. But I'm not really sure, because it is on the lower leaves and not the top leaves. The top leaves of these plants look fine. The new leaves that they're putting on look fine. And so if it was being drawn up into the plant, it would be very strange that it would be affecting just the lower leaves instead of all of them. But you know, when you're gardening, this is one of those things, you can't always know the answer. You can't always know exactly what's happening. You can only try and do your best with the information that you have. And I'm kind of lucky that I have a very large pepper patch and only part of it is affected, so I don't have to be like too upset about losing a few plants, and I have the space to experiment and learn. And that's part of what I want to show you guys, so that you know, you guys who have smaller spaces can maybe learn a little more quickly through watching me and how I handle the things that are going on in my garden. I'm also always looking to learn from others, so if you happen to recognize that, know what to do about it, put it in the comments, share it with me, share it with everyone. Alright, so coming down the other side of the pepper row, I still have this blank space here from last week that I will probably plant corn or squash here. I do have a little bit of ginger coming up here that I planted, and a lettuce that has gone to seed. It seems it hasn't quite made its seeds yet, but once it does, I can go ahead and pull that out. And this next to it is also for seed saving. These are radishes that have gone to seed. And then if I step past it, we can see the eggplants. I actually have a baby eggplant here to show you guys. Right here. This is a Nagasaki long eggplant. And I have 3 of these and 3 Antigua eggplants down here. Last year these plants got massive. 6 plants was making me more eggplant than I could like reasonably eat as one person, and I was starting to have to give it away. So do with that information what you will. Make a decision about how much eggplant to plant. For one person, if I wasn't sharing it, I would maybe go with 2. Right, this row with the trellises is still really overshadowed by the star of the show, which is this giant kale plant over here. It has been growing really well in all kinds of weather, cold, freezing temperatures all the way through 100-degree days. It's extremely hardy. So if it ever goes to seed, I will be saving seeds from it. Because as a gardener, you have that power to save your own seeds and then continually grow things that are more and more adapted to your specific spot that you're growing in. On this front trellis, I have cucumbers here, and I tried replanting a couple of times and I only got one more plant from that. So I've got 3 cucumbers here, none over here, and I might start something like little tiny winter squash, vining winter squash on that side. But I'm going to have to go around actually, because these radishes are out of hand. But these are my noodle beans. I swear they've grown probably like, I don't know, 2 feet since you guys saw them. They just climb the trellis so readily. Like, I didn't do this, it just wraps itself in a perfect little spiral. And before long, this will fill out and be a beautiful arch like it was last year. Over here behind the trellises, this is where all of my potatoes were until this weekend when I harvested. And I actually already replanted this with more potatoes because I have room in my growing season to grow 2 batches of quick potatoes. And interestingly, I do have little sprouts here. These are not from the ones I just planted, but I think from the first planting, I had golden potatoes that I planted and only one of them ever came up. And I think that those are just a couple of late bloomer plants that randomly decided to come up. So I'm gonna leave them and harvest probably in a couple of months, and at that point we will know what kind of potato they were. I've been growing determinate potatoes and not indeterminate, so you'll notice I don't have trenches here. I just planted my potatoes at soil level, and I will do minimal mounding up of straw as they get bigger. And aside from that, I think the biggest change this week is the fact that I finally harvested all of the garlic that was in here. I think I might have actually waited too long on this, because most of the time when I pull garlic, I don't have any issues with stem separation. But I had a lot of garlics that when I went to pull them, the stem came right off, and that makes me think that I perhaps waited a little too long to pull my garlic. And additionally, these are kind of small cloves. This is silver rose garlic, and I'm just thinking it's not as well adapted to my climate as the other garlic that I grew this year, which got really quite large for me. But in addition to the garlic being gone, I also took out almost all of the Brussels sprouts that were in here. And now the peppers that are over here and the zinnias have room to grow and expand. It's kind of interesting to see these pepper plants. They were in between garlic, and they kind of grew much more straight up and down than the pepper plants that did not have as much competition for space. So that's kind of interesting to see. And I still have this Brussels sprout down here that has not gone to seed, and I'm just watching to kind of see what it does. It's still looking like a pretty healthy plant in there. And then all of this space now is empty. Now along this back section near the weeds, I have been planting green beans, and you can see these first plants that I planted are getting ready to put on beans. And so the next thing I'll do is I'll plant maybe another middle section here, wait for those to get to this stage, and then plant a third section here. And if you haven't heard before, that's called succession planting, and that's something that you do with crops that grow really fast if you want to harvest them a lot fresh, so that you can kind of rotate through which plants are producing for you, so that you don't get like a lot at one time that you can't deal with, and you get them more gradually over time. My raised bed herb garden looking a little different. I pulled all of my cilantro except for this little section, which is looking finally ready to pull. And I need to come back and cut these stalks down maybe a little shorter. But it has really opened up room for my oregano and lavender and sage in here. And the only other plant taking up a lot of room is the parsley, which went to seed. And I haven't seen any of its seeds dry out yet. It's taking its sweet time. But we've also got flowering from the thyme, from the Mexican tarragon, and stevia growing up strong here. All right, and the last thing we look at is the berry patch. If you can see it between my lawn that really needs to be mowed, we've got blueberries along here, a strawberry in the corner, blackberries halfway, and then raspberries the other half of the way. And the only plant that seems to be growing super vigorously is this strawberry. This is one plant, and it has sent out so many runners. This is every tuft of leaves here can root itself and make a new plant, which is exactly what I wanted, which is why I only spent money on one really nice strawberry plant, and I'm allowing it to kind of propagate itself as a ground cover for underneath these berry bushes as they grow older. These bushes were bare root, basically just sticks when I got them, and planted them last fall, some of them this spring, and they've kind of taken a little while to take off. I kind of expected them to be doing a little better by now, but the fact that none of them are dead and they're still putting on healthy new growth at the top makes me not super worried about how slow they are being. There is a chance that what they need is more water. I am kind of a lazy watering gardener as well. I've had to water the main garden a lot because usually we get more rain, but it's been kind of dry lately, and all these thunderstorms that are like coming through have been like thundering and being crazy thunderstorms and not dropping any rain on us. And it's been kind of frustrating because then I have to go turn on the sprinkler like during a storm that's supposed to be raining on us in order to get the garden watered. And I haven't been doing the sprinkler on the berry patch, but it might be time to start actually manually watering that area as well. Yeah, my garden isn't perfect, and I'm okay with that. I'm not striving for perfect, I am striving for productive. So thank you guys so much for watching, for keeping up with the garden. Any questions that you have, you can always leave them in the comments below. And if you want to catch up on garden tours, if this is your first one and you want to see where I started, you can go ahead and check out my previous garden tour playlists here. Until next time, happy gardening.